It was a calm March morning in a quiet Michigan neighborhood. Inside a small mobile home, two men were talking. The mood was tense, but nothing seemed out of control, at least not yet. Then, in a split second, everything changed. A quick movement, two loud blasts, and in an instant, one life was gone, and another was forever changed. Just days before, it had all started with what looked like a harmless TV segment. No one knew it would end in a tragedy that would shock the country and spark a debate that still hasn't gone away. If you're a fan of true crime and criminal investigations, you won't want to miss our new book, The Ultimate Book of Serial Killers: 180 Files of the World's Most Notorious Murderers, now available on Amazon. You can also purchase the PDF version directly from our website for instant download. You'll find the link in the video description and in a pinned comment. Now, let's dive into today's case. Scott Amadeur was born on January 26, 1963, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania's second-largest city, into a working-class household. His father, Frank Amadeur, earned a living as a truck driver, while his mother, Patricia Graves, dedicated herself to the home. When Scott was still an infant, the family went through a major change. In 1968, they relocated to Michigan. The move marked the beginning of a difficult new chapter. His parents soon divorced, and the separation split the siblings apart. Scott and three of his brothers remained with their father, while the others stayed with their mother. This division would shape the family dynamic for years to come. As he entered his teenage years, Scott developed a magnetic personality. He was outgoing, warm, generous, and empathetic, always quick to connect with others. At 17, searching for structure and discipline, he made the bold decision to leave school and enlist in the United States Air Force. It was during this period that Scott opened up to his family about his attraction to men. According to one of his brothers, the news was met not with judgment, but with love and acceptance. He went on to serve in the military for 3 to 4 years, earning an honorable discharge with the rank of specialist. After his service, Scott returned to Michigan and entered the telecommunications industry. But the work, while steady, lacked the vibrancy he craved. Eventually, he transitioned to bartending at a popular gay club in the city, a job that suited his extroverted nature. The lively atmosphere of the nightlife scene became his world, and he thrived within it. Known for his enthusiasm and generosity, he built a wide social circle and became a respected figure in his community. Scott loved American talk shows, especially the entertainment programs that dominated television in the 1990s. Yet, behind the charisma, he faced personal battles. He struggled with substance abuse and emotional stability, challenges he confronted head-on by attending rehabilitation more than once. Friends described him as having a quick wit, a sensitive nature, and an unwavering willingness to help others. At a time when stigma around HIV/AIDS was at its peak, Scott opened his home to friends struggling with the illness when no one else would. It was this same openness to life's experiences that drew him to an unusual opportunity. He came across an advertisement for the Jenny Jones Show, which was seeking participants for a segment about revealing secret same-sex crushes. For Scott, a devoted fan of talk shows, the idea was irresistible, not only for the chance to appear on television, but because he had a personal revelation he wanted to share. Scott was attracted to his friend and neighbor, 24-year-old Jonathan Schmitz. Jonathan had even flirted with him on occasion, and in Scott's mind, the show would be the perfect stage to make his feelings known. Jonathan, born July 18, 1970, in Michigan, had a reputation among acquaintances as polite and charming. Yet beneath that exterior lay a fragile emotional state. He had a history of depression, substance abuse, and physical health issues, compounded by a turbulent family background. Scott applied to the show, and after speaking with producers, he was invited to Chicago for the taping. Excited, he called his friend Donna Riley to share the news and ask her to accompany him. Meanwhile, the Jenny Jones Show also contacted Jonathan, but with a misleading twist. They told him his secret admirer was a woman. Jonathan, recently single after the end of a long-term relationship, assumed it might be an ex-girlfriend or an unknown female admirer. On March 6, 1995, Scott, now 32, arrived at the studio for the taping of an episode titled Same-Sex Secret Crushes. He had no way of knowing that this day would change his life forever. On stage, in front of a live audience, he revealed his attraction to Jonathan, describing light-hearted fantasies he had imagined, such as the two of them lounging in a hammock at his home with champagne and whipped cream. At that moment, Jonathan was backstage, unaware of who was speaking or what was being said. When he finally stepped onto the set and heard the revelation, he appeared surprised. The audience laughed, but his discomfort was visible. Blushing, covering his face, and clearly embarrassed, he stated for the cameras that he was heterosexual. 3 days after the taping of The Jenny Jones Show, the morning of March 9, 1995, events took a deadly turn. That day, Jonathan Schmitz discovered a handwritten note left at the door of his home. The message was suggestive and allegedly signed by Scott. Shortly after reading it, Jonathan drove to a bank and withdrew cash. He then made his way to a local gun store where he purchased a 12-gauge shotgun along with a box of ammunition. Armed and with a plan in motion, he set out for the mobile home where Scott lived. According to case records, when Jonathan arrived, he confronted Scott about the note. Reports suggest that Scott acknowledged writing it. Moments later, Jonathan excused himself, claiming he needed to return to his vehicle because it was still running. In reality, he went to retrieve the shotgun. Re-entering the home, he raised the weapon and fired twice into Scott's chest. The wounds were catastrophic, killing him almost instantly. Inside the residence at the time was Gary, one of Scott's housemates. Horrified by what he had just witnessed, Gary quickly dialed 911 to report the shooting and request help. Surprisingly, Jonathan also called the police himself, his voice shaking with emotion as he admitted to the killing. News of the incident spread rapidly, dominating headlines and television broadcasts. The combination of a sensational talk show segment and a sudden act of lethal violence made it a national story almost overnight. Police arrived at the crime scene within minutes. Scott's body lay lifeless, and officers wasted no time in taking Jonathan into custody. But as the investigation began, public outrage was not directed solely at the killer. Many critics turned their attention toward The Jenny Jones Show, arguing that the producers had played a role in creating the circumstances that led to Scott's death. Facing mounting criticism, the program issued a formal statement just 6 days later, on March 15, 1995. At the start of that day's episode, host Jenny Jones addressed viewers directly. She expressed deep regret over the tragedy, but insisted that it was the result of one individual's actions, not the show itself. She also claimed that Jonathan had been informed beforehand that his secret admirer could be either a man or a woman, a point that Jonathan would later deny. Despite the statement, the debate over the show's responsibility intensified. The murder had not only claimed a life but had also sparked a national conversation about the ethics of televised entertainment, the manipulation of guests, and the consequences of turning private matters into public spectacle. In the days following Scott Amador's death, the families of both men began to speak out. Jonathan Schmitz's father placed the blame squarely on the Jenny Jones show, insisting that the program had provoked the circumstances that led to his son's actions. His grandfather went even further, telling reporters that he believed Jenny Jones herself had acted as the trigger behind the crime. On Scott's side, one of his brothers expressed that, in his view, the murder would never have happened if the show had not exposed Scott's sexuality on national television, especially at a time when homosexuality was still considered a sensitive and often stigmatized topic in much of American society. The police investigation moved quickly. Jonathan had already confessed, and investigators had strong physical evidence from the crime scene, along with corroborating witness statements from neighbors and acquaintances. Yet one detail later emerged from a close friend of Scott's. He claimed that after the taping, there had been a night out during which Scott and Jonathan may have engaged in an intimate encounter. Jonathan, however, always denied this, maintaining that he had been left humiliated and deeply unsettled by the public revelation on the show. He insisted that the producers had led him to believe his admirer was a woman, which only intensified his feelings of betrayal when the truth was revealed on camera. As media coverage grew, the case evolved into more than just a murder trial. It became a flashpoint for discussions about homophobia, public humiliation, and the ethics of sensationalist television. The legal proceedings began on October 14, 1996. Prosecutors initially charged Jonathan with first-degree premeditated murder and felony firearm offenses. The defense countered with a mental health argument, stating that Jonathan suffered from manic depression, now referred to as bipolar disorder, as well as Graves's disease, a thyroid condition known to cause symptoms such as anxiety, irritability, tremors, heart palpitations, and excessive sweating. They also invoked what was then called the gay panic defense, claiming that Jonathan's violent reaction stemmed from an overwhelming sense of public humiliation and emotional shock that he was unable to control. This strategy drew fierce criticism from LGBTQ+ rights advocates, who viewed it as an unacceptable attempt to justify violence based on sexual orientation. During the trial, jurors were repeatedly shown footage from the Jenny Jones episode. After weeks of testimony and arguments, they returned a verdict on November 13, 1996. Jonathan was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to a term of no less than 25 and no more than 50 years in state prison. The case might have ended there, but in March 1999, the Amador family filed a civil lawsuit against the Jenny Jones Show, Warner Brothers, and other associated parties. The lawsuit became a high-profile legal battle, raising unprecedented questions about television's responsibility for the psychological well-being of its participants. The family argued that the show had deliberately engineered a dangerous, emotionally volatile situation for the sake of ratings. The suit alleged wrongful death, claiming producers had knowingly exposed Jonathan to a potentially humiliating and psychologically damaging scenario without his informed consent. Their legal team presented evidence that producers had misled Jonathan into thinking the revelation would involve a heterosexual romantic interest, while ignoring warning signs of emotional instability in both him and Scott. Testimony during the trial also shed light on the program's behind-the-scenes tactics, accounts that portrayed a production culture willing to push emotional boundaries for entertainment value, regardless of potential harm. In May 1999, after just 3 hours of deliberation, the jury unanimously sided with the Amador family. They found both the show and the network liable, awarding nearly $30 million in damages. The verdict was widely covered in the press and ignited a nationwide debate about the ethical limits of entertainment television and its role in causing psychological or physical harm. However, the outcome would not stand. The show's and network's attorneys appealed, arguing that the producers could not have foreseen such an extreme criminal act and that responsibility rested solely with Jonathan. In September 2002, the Michigan Court of Appeals overturned the jury's decision, clearing the show and Warner Brothers of any legal obligation to pay damages. The appellate ruling that overturned the civil judgment rested on the argument that freedom of expression and press protections allowed for certain types of content, even if that content was socially controversial or potentially harmful. As a result, the Amador family never received the nearly $30 million in damages originally awarded by the first jury verdict. Still, the case left an impact on The Jenny Jones Show. In the wake of the controversy, the production implemented a counseling protocol for guests, both before and after episodes were taped. But the damage to its reputation was irreversible. Ratings steadily declined, and within a year, the once popular talk show was canceled and removed from the air entirely. As for the episode involving Scott and Jonathan, it was never officially broadcast, though portions of the footage appeared in news reports and court coverage. Jonathan's legal battles did not end there. His attorneys appealed his criminal conviction, arguing procedural errors and claiming that the intense media exposure, producer manipulation, and his documented mental health issues had not been adequately considered during the first trial. The appeal led to a retrial, and on September 14, 1999, Jonathan was once again found guilty of second-degree murder. The original sentence of 25 to 50 years in state prison was reinstated. He remained behind bars for nearly 22 years. Eventually, citing good behavior, he became eligible for parole and was released on August 22, 2017, at the age of 47. Following his release, Jonathan avoided the public eye, living quietly and refraining from giving any substantial statements about the case that had made him infamous. The Amador family, however, continued to speak out. They remained vocal about the need for accountability, insisting on recognition of the systemic failures that had allowed Scott's death to occur. Over the years, the case of Scott and Jonathan became one of the most notable intersections of criminal justice, media ethics, and hate crime discourse in the United States. It stood as a stark example of how entertainment-driven manipulation could have real-world, irreversible consequences. In May 2020, the story was revisited in the debut episode of the Netflix docuseries Trial by Media. The program examined what it described as the profound lack of ethical responsibility in certain daytime talk shows of the 1990s, shows that deliberately exposed people's private lives to public scrutiny in the pursuit of ratings. Today, the Scott Amador case remains a cautionary tale, one that continues to resonate in discussions about media accountability, the boundaries of free speech, and the human cost of turning deeply personal matters into public spectacle. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.